Welcome back to Saints and Alumni here on 88.3 The Saint. I'm joined now by class of 1996 grad, Laura Zebrowski, Assaf. Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Joe. It's a pleasure.
It has been about 10 years since anyone's heard my voice on 88.3, so I thank you for being the first person to converse with me, have a conversation, and, they're allowing me to do this again, put my name on the airwaves. So I thank you for coming on. Our first question to you is the question that we ask pretty much any alumni, anytime, any place. It's the question I get asked, like once a week, especially since I started working here again. Why did you choose Siena College?
Great question, one I love to answer. And the bottom line is I chose Siena because of the way I felt when I was on that campus. And that did not change throughout my time there. But when I did my tour and really learned about the campus and the opportunities, it wasn't just the information that was presented, it was the feeling, it was the inclusiveness, it was the warmth, and it was the personality of the population that I saw as I was walking through campus. And then it was the offer of a presidential scholarship that was so meaningful because it was acknowledging and honoring not only the academic achievement, but also the community service involvement and all the extracurricular commitment that I had demonstrated during high school. So that pulled me right in, and I never regretted it for a moment.
And it was something that we talked about when we first met a few months back. It's just the way Siena is, like everyone has those similar, that similar background, that similar story, but they take their own path, and it really is about the values. It really is about the Franciscan tradition. Like we like to say, holding doors. I mean, it's still a thing to this day. I'm sure it was when you were here. It was when I was here. We keep on trucking when it comes to that. You touched on this a little bit, but I do want to ask. So in your 4 years here, what about your experience makes you proud to be a Saint? So when someone, when you say I went to Siena College, to anyone, who you introduce yourselves to, what makes you proud to say that?
Well, that's another great question. And it's changed for me a little bit most recently because I am now the proud mom of a 17-year-old who's looking at colleges. And to hear him talk about Siena after having done a tour this summer and to talk to other people about it, he says, my mom's a Siena grad, my dad's a Siena grad, one of my favorite aunts is a Siena grad, my favorite doctor is a Siena grad, one of my favorite teachers is a Siena grad, and he goes on and on. And seeing him want to be part of that group of people is pretty incredible. But again, I grew up in Guilderland. I went to Siena for undergrad. I went to the University at Albany for graduate and my doctorate. And Siena means something in this area. And it's nice to be part of that group.
I know we had talked about a few months ago, there is a potential family connection when it comes to a potential future Saints. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yes, oh, I'm so proud. So my nephew will be starting in September, and he was awarded the presidential scholarship, and that's thrilling for us. And hopefully my son the following year. It's the only school he's looking at right now. So
I hear that a lot, especially if what you essentially part of a legacy family is, what your family is. And a lot of people say, Siena is the only place I've looked. And I mean, I know when I applied, I applied to several schools. I was a young, naive high schooler, didn't really know which direction I wanted to go to. But when I finally, signed on the dotted line, accepted, I said to myself, and you should probably feel the same way. Why would I choose anywhere else? This is the perfect fit. So, and it seems to be that way when you come from a legacy family and so many people and you have those connections.
Yes. And it never steered me wrong. I was fortunate in that I went in knowing I was a psychology major and knowing that I wanted my doctorate once I left Siena. And it was a promise I made my parents. They said, if we're going to help fund an undergrad education in psychology, because at the time, psychology was the most common major on campus, you need to know that you have to be committed to going on, which I was. But I walked into my advisor right from the get-go and said, I am getting a doctorate in psychology. How do I get there? And he told me exactly exactly what I needed to do, and he helped me get there. Because of Siena, because of the opportunity to work directly with professors who know you and know you well, I published as an undergrad. I attended professional conferences. I did 2 internships, one of which was at the University at Albany, where I coded data for research that was happening and being published there as well. And so those connections were critical for when at 21 I graduated and walked into a doctoral program. And it was all because of Siena. And I know I wouldn't have had those opportunities had I chosen another undergrad university.
So I want to touch a little bit now about, you talk about your psychology major and
Yes.
your graduate degree afterwards. So how did your time here on campus and your time, getting that Siena education, you work now with capital psychology.
I do.
How did this education help fuel your career now?
Well, first of all, the undergraduate psychology education was, it was so relevant. It was exactly what was occurring, at the time. And it was everything I needed, as I said, to be prepared for that graduate education. And again, knowing I wanted to go on and knowing what I needed to do, the internships, I had a very clinical internship in which I was hired right away. So I was able to work while I was going through graduate school at one of my internships. So everything lined up beautifully. And what Siena taught me was the problem solving skills and the critical thinking skills that I needed to go into graduate school and to really differentiate myself there. I was only one of 5 candidates in that doctoral program when I started.
Wow.
And I had enough of an undergraduate education and exploration of all the different areas of psychology to know exactly where I wanted my focus to be. I was committed to staying in the area, and University at Albany had a doctoral program in school psychology, and I had done the work to know that that was the most clinical child program I could possibly get. And it was a perfect fit. And again, I was incredibly well prepared. And I was the only person that was going into that program directly from an undergraduate program. So the other people who were starting that program with me this was their second career. So they had already
Wow.
been out in the world. They had had all of these clinical experiences. But because of what Siena allowed me to do by doubling up on internships and working with professors, I was right there with
Yeah.
them. I was young and that got commented on a lot, but I was prepared.
I can attest to that too. I mean, we talked a little bit about this when I was a student here. I was working at a local TV station, and then I was the youngest person in the room. Didn't really know what I was doing, but when I finally went on to my graduate degree and went into the real world, I had that experience, and if it was not for this place, Siena College, I wouldn't have, taken that career path at that point in my life. Um, it's April, and a lot of students out there are trying to decide if they want to come to Siena College. If someone were to ask you right now, if they were undecided and they had Siena either, kind of near the top of their list, but they're not really sure. They're trying to think of that extra piece, that little piece of info that'll send them, send Siena to the top of their list. What would you tell them?
It's the people. It is the classmates that are chosen to be there with you, and it is the professors and the advisors who will get to know you. They will help you figure out who you are, where you're going, and what your future needs to look like to meet those needs or goals that you have set up for yourself. You can do that at Siena. You are not a number. Like I said, the relationships that I developed with those professors meant everything when I was hoping to move on from there. And we know there's a strong network of alumni. And
Oh
we
yeah.
know that if
Oh
there are
yeah.
multiple candidates for a position and the person in that position is a Siena alum, they're going to give the benefit of the doubt to the other Siena alum. So that means something, in this world today where we are all striving for connectedness and relationships. Siena already has it. And it also emphasizes character growth. I was just doing a meeting with the Social Emotional Learning Committee of Guildwood Central Schools, and it's a volunteer, it's community service because of what I do and because of my role in the community and the fact that I consult to the district and I have kids in the district.
Mhm.
And it was about the character development and a curriculum for doing that within our schools. And so when you look at resiliency and you look at how do we help our kids, especially today in this climate, in this landscape, it is developing young people of character. And Siena does that. It just does that innately because of who it is and who is there.
And Siena, you talk about, the global climate we're in, still in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. I came back to Siena in September, and just to see how this community has come together and worked with each other and followed the guidelines, looking out for their fellow student, their fellow classmate, just to get through it. Like, it's incredible to see how this community, even when faced with so much adversity, still can manage to, do the impossible, let's say,
And you kept your students on campus and you kept them safe.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
everything.
Laura, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, though, we're going to talk a bit more about what you've been up to after Siena College. A quick reminder to our listeners, you can watch today's interview in its entirety on the Siena College Alumni Relations YouTube page. We will be right back here on 88.3 The Saint. Welcome back to Saints and Alumni here on 88.3 The Saint. I am Joe Frumusa. We're talking with Laura Assaf from the class of 1996. Should I mention the elephant in the room, or should I say the pup in the room? If you're listening to us on the radio, you obviously can't see what we're seeing, but if you're watching this on YouTube, you will. Who is that with you?
So this is Tenny the second. And Tenny is an almost 4-month-old puppy from Canine Companions for Independence. Tenny is a puppy that my family is raising. He is the third puppy that we are raising for Canine Companions. So when he grows up and he leaves us after 18 to 20 months, he will go into advanced training for 6 months at one of these incredible centers throughout the country. And then he will get matched with his forever person to serve.
Now, Laura, some of our alumni community, the Siena community as a whole, have seen a little bit of your story already. We profiled you as a saint who doesn't sit on the sidelines back in January, and we touched a little bit about what you do with Canine Companions. How did your family get started with something, I say incredible, I say it all the time, I think it's fascinating what your family does. How did you first get involved doing this?
Oh, thank you for asking me that. So this is probably one of the greatest joys of our family life right now. So I founded Capital Psychology in Guilderland when my now 17-year-old was 5 and was starting kindergarten, because although I have a fabulous career, I needed to be a mom first always. And I needed to be able to attend every PTA meeting and every field trip with them and really be available. So at that time, I had been a consultant psychologist to Wildwood Schools, and I had been building my private practice, and I decided that that was the time. So along with that, my son had some significant medical and health needs. And I also, again, being a consultant psychologist to the district and wanting to do the direct training of his staff, needed to be available. And with my work, I specialize in neurodevelopmental diagnosis. So I work with children ages 3 and up and all the way through adulthood when they are experiencing any type of neurodivergence, and we're trying to get a better understanding of what their needs are and how to develop programs and treatment recommendations for them. So through my work with Capital Psychology, I had the privilege of writing medical justifications for a number of families of children on the autism spectrum to get a service dog through Canine Companions for Independence. So that was my first introduction to the program. When my son's situation deteriorated pretty dramatically when he was 6 years old, we started pursuing specialists across the country and doing everything we could. Functional medicine, traditional therapies, physical therapy, occupational therapy, play therapy, speech and language. And he also qualified for something called IVIG, where he needed infusions regularly to build antibodies and proteins because he had a deficient immune system. So as this progressed, I said, why not Will? Will's my son. And I said, he should meet the mission of this program, even though they had never heard of his condition and had never been a child before with this condition, because it is rarely diagnosed, that qualified. So I wrote a letter as a mom to CCI, and they knew my name because I had written those medical justifications for children who were living with their dogs. And, they went out of the box and they did the research and they said, he does meet our mission. send in the application. So the application process is quite lengthy. It's very thorough, very comprehensive. And then the wait list can be quite long as well, because you are receiving one of these dogs entirely free of charge. And that is also, the joy of CCI, is that they're able to do this through donations, through fundraising, through all of their donors. So we went through that process. We got Will his dog, Tashi too, and it was life-changing. There were changes that were measurable within 3 months. So we were sold entirely and in love with this most incredible dog. So my then 10-year-old, who had learned all about puppy raising when we were there, matching Will with Tashi, said, I need to be a puppy raiser. And far be it from us to turn down any service opportunity that
of course.
In. And we said, how do we make this happen? So we had to have Tashi matched with Will successfully for 1 year, maintaining their ADI, Assistance Dogs International certification and all of that. And it went so beautifully that we got approved as puppy raisers, and we went on the wait list, and then we got matched with our first dog. And so we had Gem on the 5th, and then we had Alumni, and now we have Tenny too. So we raise these pups for 18 to 20 months, and then they go into advanced training, as I said, for another 6 months, and then they get matched with their forever person. And we get far more out of it than we could ever give. And people say all the time, how do you do it? How do you love those dogs? They see me.
Yeah.
That the dogs are the mascots for Danny's sports team. It comes everywhere. They come to all the school, well, pre-COVID, recitals and concerts and meetings. And, our canned responses, somebody did it for us, because they did. And again, we want to have the impact on another person or family's life that Tashi had on ours. So, and again, it's a lot of work. There are a lot of responsibilities and a lot of rules, but it is something that we are all so committed to, that it's just a wonderful family experience.
You mentioned earlier, and we talked about this, a few months ago, somebody did it for us. You kind of like have had, at least when we've spoken, you've kind of coined it as, the reason why you've done this. I guess it goes back to, you tie it back to a Siena education. It's a looking out for your fellow person, someone else who needs assistance. They'll help you. You in turn, it's help them. It's the idea of the Franciscan mission,
Yes, with the love of dogs, no less.
Oh, yes. You talk about, so for an average person,
yes,
who sees what you do, obviously you're raising these young pups. They're adorable. They grow to be, great companions to those who need them. But you say it's a lot of work. So take me through like what a typical day would be, on the early end of training a dog, and then, right before they are given up and they do go to their companion.
Sure. So you bring home your puppy. So this little guy, again, because of COVID, things are a little bit different. Our last puppy was flown into us directly at Albany International. This little guy, it is catch us, catch can in terms of getting the flights, because all of the dogs are bred and whelped in Santa Rosa, California. And so he was flying into JFK, and it was around the time we were turning in our others. So we literally drove down to the center in Long Island to turn in and matriculate in Illini. And then we drove to JFK to get this little guy. So, for anybody who's raised a puppy, 8 weeks old, their needs are tremendous in terms of the housebreaking and, making sure they're not exposed to anything that would cause a fear so early on, and nurturing and feeding. They're fed 3 times a day when they're this little, and, playing and stimulating, but not overwhelming, and ensuring they have time to rest, and ensuring that you start the crate training early. CCI provides tremendous support, and they give you the protocol. And if you follow it, then it actually becomes quite easy. The first 8 weeks are exhausting, as it is with any puppy who's usually not sleeping through the night.
Of course.
But it gets easier and easier. And by 4 months, when they're fully vaccinated, you start taking them everywhere with you. And so when you start training a dog that young to be that social and quiet when they're in a restaurant and under the table tucked in, we always call it invisible. A dog should not be seen in a restaurant. When you're in Target shopping, the dog should be in an under the shelves right there,
Sure.
Not be in the way. And again, if you do it, and there are so many supports, from the puppy liaison to a puppy mentor to the puppy program at our center in Medford, Long Island. You know, you just follow their program and you see how well it works. And, you know, you see these dogs are just incredible in terms of their temperaments and their behavior, and they learn quickly and they're highly motivated. So yes, it's a lot of work, but I always say, you know, it's easy because you're given the greatest dogs to be able to do this with.
For downstaters like me, the proof that you love these dogs, driving from Long Island,
Oh,
JFK.
back to Albany. I know it is
uh,
true. It is true.
when you told me that a few months back, I'm like, oh man, well, she loves these dogs. And why not? I mean, it's incredible work that you do. We have talked about in the past, that feeling of gratitude, but also a bit of sadness when you do have to give them up, when their time with you is over. Just walk me through that just a little bit, and just, you know, tell us how the feeling of reward, of course, outweighs the feeling of sadness, correct?
So pre-COVID, of course, and again, CCI does it right. I can't say enough about this organization. We just love and adore and respect them so much. But when we turned in our first dog, it was at a graduation ceremony. And there are 6 centers throughout the country, and graduations happen 4 times a year. So when you go in as a puppy raiser, you are treated like gold. You are welcomed with open arms. You are wearing a badge that has your name and it says proud puppy raiser of the puppy raised. And you go in and you're interviewed and you're fed and you talk with all the other puppy raisers, and then you go to graduation. And as puppy raisers, you sit there with your puppy, and the puppies get matriculated across stage to a slideshow of pictures of their puppyhood. And then you watch graduation, and you watch 12 to 15 recipients go up on that stage, and you see the slideshow of their advanced training, team training experience. And then you watch the puppy raiser hand the leash over to the recipient. And it just is so beautiful. So, you know, each of us in our family, we respond to the separation differently. With the 2 dogs I turned in, I cried every day for a month before turning them in, preparing and trying to picture life without him or her. And then whereas the guys, my husband and my 2 boys, it's much more, they hold it in until that moment. And it's hard. It's really hard. I will say that the antidote to that heartbreak is bringing home an 8-week-old puppy.
Yes.
Starting over again. The distraction helps immensely.
Before I forget, I want to mention CCI's website, cci.org.
Yes.
If anyone listening or watching is interested in learning more, cci.org is their website. Laura, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. And I will tell you that my vision is to start a puppy raising program for CCI on Siena's campus, because I can't think of a better place. And it is happening in other colleges and universities across the country. But given Siena students and, you know, the location and the green space, I can't think of a better place to raise some puppies. So
I can guarantee it'll be pretty popular. I can guarantee you that. Laura, thank you again. That's going to do it for this episode of Saints and Alumni. Once again, I want to thank my guest, Laura Assaf, for being here. Remember, you can catch us every Friday at 4:30 p.m. right here on WVCR 88.3 The Saint, and anywhere in the world on the iHeartRadio app. I'm Joe Frumusa, wishing you a good night and a great weekend ahead. Take care.